Hello, welcome to episode 168 of the Craft House Magic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and today is the 10th of June, so welcome everybody. I hope you've all had a lovely crafty week since the last time I've spoken to you, and I'm here to share all the things that I've been making in the last 7 days. So today we have some knitting, some crochet, some sewing, some cross stitch, a couple of questions from the Ask Me Anything thread, and a little bit of information on my shop update. So you can find me as Craft House Magic on Instagram, Ravelry and Facebook, and I have my own website crafthousemagicc.co.uk where you can find my hand-dyed yarns, handmade project bags, stitch markers, knitting needles, crochet hooks and also bag making supplies. So let's get on with the good stuff, shall we? I will start with the knitting as always, and I have a finished object. So these socks are the French meringue socks, and it's a lovely pattern by Marianne Heikkinen. And it's got this gorgeous cable motif all the way down the front of the sock with a plain back and plain underfoot, and it's the same on both socks. I've used a contrast yarn for the heels and the toes, and this is a yarn from West Green Loft Yarns. It is on her classic sock set base, which is 75% superwash merino and 25% nylon, and the colourway is Margot and Tara. And I'm really pleased that I finally got this knitted up. I had this yarn planned for this pattern for ages, and it is one of my make 9, so that's always good. So those are finished. So they haven't been wet blocked properly, but I've just popped them on the sock blockers to sort of stretch over and neaten them up a little bit, but they should neaten up a little bit more once I've blocked them properly. The heel I used actually was the heel that I've got in my simple top-down sock pattern, which is a free pattern on my website, rather than following the one in the pattern, just because I remember this one off the top of my head and I just thought, I'll stick with what I normally use, and I used the contrast yarn for that as well. So I've done a shorter cuff on these just because they're shorties, because I was using a 50g main colour and 20g mini, and I was a bit worried about running out of yarn, but I just still had actually quite a lot, and I'm about a 5.5, so these are knitted for me. But there we go, all finished. Right, so that's the only thing that I've got that I've actually been properly working on, but I have got a cast on ready to start, and I've dyed up some yarn ready for the cast on, and it's in my Pretty in Pink colourway on my merino and nylon base. I'm going to make a cardigan. So it's going to be the Sparkle cardigan by Joji Locatelli, and this is one of my Make 9 projects. So that means I haven't got that many left finished before the end of the year, so that's good. Although this project and one other is another garment, so I still have quite a bit to go. So we shall see. But I love this colour, and I'm hoping it won't look too washed out against my skin tone, but we shall see. But I thought that it would go with quite a few of my dresses, so I'm going to knit a version that's to the waistline so that I can wear it with a dress. If I was going to wear it with trousers, I'd want it to be longer, but with it being to go with dresses, I want it to go just to the waist, if that makes sense. So hopefully I'll get a good start on that for next week. So now I'm on to the crochet section, and if you follow me on Instagram you'll see that I've posted a picture of how I'm getting on with my blanket, and this is how it looks. So I had a few squares left over from the cushion that I crocheted a little while ago from the same pattern, the Battenberg pattern, and it's a gorgeous pattern by Sandra from Cherry Heart, and it's basically these little squares that you join together and you can crochet little bits out of samples that you've got left over of yarn, and then I've used a undyed yarn to sort of disperse between those colours to make it all come together. So I've just used an undyed merino and nylon yarn, and I do sell the undyed skeins in my shop, and I call it Like a Virgin. That seemed the most appropriate title. So I really like how these pieces come together on the back as well, because it looks really neat with the double crochet on the back. And I got quite a bit done this week, I think. Well, for my crocheting speed anyway. I am quite a slow crocheter, so I haven't done too bad at all. I have started making a few more little squares. So these two here are actually the same colourways as I used for my socks, so I've done little squares for those to go in the blanket as well. And I've done a couple more like this one, but I've no idea what this particular one is because it's a little scrap out of my stash. So that's coming along nicely. I'm not quite sure how big I'm going to do it, but it is going to be a blanket, probably like a lap size blanket, I should imagine. So like I said, the pattern is the Battenberg blanket from Sandra Paul from the Cherry Heart podcast, and it's a free pattern, and it is just a lovely way of using up small bits of yarn that you've got left over, but also actually on a nice summery day when you don't want too much on your lap, if you just want to crochet the little squares and sit in the garden and do them, that's a great thing to do. I love doing this sort of thing in the summer. So I'm using a 3mm crochet hook for this, like it says in the instructions, and I'm using 4-ply yarn. There's some really good tutorials online that Sandra's done for putting this blanket together. There's some photographic tutorials on the website and also some video tutorials as well. But I will link to her website where she links to those separate tutorials. So there we go, that's my crochet. So next is the sewing section. Now, I've been doing a lot of dressmaking lately, and I thought I'd mix it up a bit and do a little bit of quilting. So I've been on my Make 9 list for my sewing things that I need to do. I wanted to make a cover for my overlocker. So I've actually completed that, well, at least one of my machines. I want to do another cover for this machine behind me here. I've always put the cushion in front of it because it's just a plain white cover. So actually, if I made a nice cover for it like this one, it'd look much better. So what I did is I used some Tilda fabric to make this up, and I've just done some line quilting all the way down the panels using, actually one of my feet on my sewing machine is 1 centimetre from the needle to the edge of the foot, so I use that as a guideline to do the quilting lines, and I did that down the side as well and right over the back. So in order to get this to fit, what I did is there was actually a plastic cover that was included with my machine, which has been covering it for ages. So what I did is I took the plastic cover that goes over the machine that came with it, it looks really scruffy, and I tried to lay it out onto a piece of paper, and I traced out this side panel to get it to the right size to make a pattern piece. And I managed to get that onto the table, draw the actual side panel onto a piece of paper, and then I added a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and this is just some pattern paper that I use for dressmaking. The actual centre portion, so the actual piece of material that goes right over the top, probably be able to see it better on the one I've made, is just one long rectangle. So what I did is I just measured the distance over the top of how big that rectangle needed to be and how wide it needed to be, and I cut a piece of fabric for that, and then cut the lining the same, and obviously some wadding in the middle. I layered up the top piece of fabric over the wadding, and then I quilted it and sewed those pieces together. And then I did some lining pieces out of some really thick calico because I thought that would be quite durable to go right up against the workings of the machine so that it would last longer. And then I sewed the inside panel pieces together and then fitted it inside. When I sewed the lining pieces together, I actually used an extra 1/8 of an inch on top of the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance that I used for the outside, just to make it a tiny bit smaller so that it would fit a bit better. And then once I'd fitted that lining in, I actually took another 1/4 of an inch off the bottom so that it wouldn't actually sort of have excess, and it would just reach nicely inside and not stick out at the bottom or anything. So I cut another 1/4 of an inch, and then I just used some binding to finish off all the way around the bottom, and I just hand sewed that binding on the inside. I used a cream material that went well with the print on this fabric. Isn't that pretty? So this is a Tilda fabric that I've had in my stash for absolutely ages, and I thought that it would be nice to have it on my overlocker cover. And also I thought that this sort of print isn't too sort of wild and sort of distracting in the room, so that if I've got lots of machine covers it doesn't look too busy, if that makes sense. So I have got my cover stitch to do a cover for, and also the machine behind, as I say. So I'm hoping to do those other two this weekend. But I'm really pleased that I did this. I just love this type of straight line quilting. I just think, and it gives such a nice effect, and it just makes it nice and sort of squishy. I did use my wadding that I sell on my online shop in here, which is a soft and bright polyester wadding, which is nice and light. That's why I use it, because it's ideal for making bag making, really, because it's not too heavy. But I thought it'd be ideal for doing the cover for the machine as well, because actually the calico is quite heavy as well, so we don't want to add to the weight of it. So there we go, there's a simple sewing machine cover. There's already a lot of tutorials out there to show you how to make a cover if you haven't got a sort of template that you can go from, because it can be a bit tricky deciding what measurements to start with. But if you have got a plastic cover like this, at least then you know where to start, and you can always reduce the size if you didn't like it that big. So there we go, that's my sewing section. So my next section is cross stitch. I don't feel as if I've got loads done on this, but I have finished all the cross stitch section on my bookmark, and I have just got the back stitch left to go. So that is how it looks without the back stitch on, and I think if you look at the photograph what it's supposed to look like, that back stitch is really going to finish it off nicely. But I have finished all of the cross stitch bit, and I cannot wait to start making it up into a proper bookmark and then actually use it. I think that is a really sweet picture, really lovely. So this is a pattern by Michael Powell, and you can get these as kits. I bought mine as a kit from it was either the Knitting and Stitching show or the Quilt show a couple of years ago, and it comes with all you need, with all the threads and this Aida, some backing material and a tassel as well, so that's really good. I will pop a link to the kits in the description bar down below. So hopefully next week, fingers crossed, I get all the back stitching done. So I have a couple of questions from the Ask Me Anything thread now, and the first question is from Amy, and she was actually asking me a cross stitch question, so I will get my cross stitch out again. So she was asking, what is my preferred method for dealing with stitches that are sort of scattered and single? So you can see there's like a little brown stitch just out on its own there. So what I tend to do for these is I tend to use the loop method to start the cross stitch, or a pin stitch, depending on whether I've got one or two colours that I'm mixing together, or whether I've already started the thread already. And then once I've done that stitch, I will try and do another pin stitch in the same square. So you've got the cross that you've just stitched, I will try and do the pin stitch just below it so that it's sort of invisible, because, well, at least on this material anyway, sometimes I feel on some of the Aida materials that I can do a pin stitch in an area that isn't stitched at all. It's not going to be stitched on top of, and it was invisible. But I think with this Aida, it's just a little bit, it's more open somehow, so it doesn't hide the little pin stitches very well. So I will also leave some links in the description bar down below to some pin stitch tutorials if you haven't tried pin stitch before, but it is ideal for starting and finishing on fabric where you don't want to have all the threads running across the back. Now, sometimes there are some little stitches sort of dotted around, so 3 or 4 blocks apart. I will run the floss on the back of the work then. I'm not that fussed about doing every little separate square very separate, as long as it's no more than about 3 squares apart from the last cross stitch you've done. Otherwise I'd use the same method as I spoke about just a minute ago. But there we go. Hopefully that helps you, Amy. So the next question from the Ask Me Anything thread is from Mrs. Carruthers, and she was saying, can I show some of my yarn clubs from the previous month? Of course, I will get a couple out to show you. So this one is based on I Had the Time of My Life from Dirty Dancing, and this is back in March that I released this one, so this is quite an early-ish one this year, so if people have ordered it they should have got it by now. But that's basically based on I had the time of my life. So I've got inspiration from this from Baby's dress. It's like a pale pink colour, and then I put grey in it and black speckles for Johnny, to represent Johnny, and I thought, of course, you always need the pink contrast mini to go with that. But you can see there are some delicate speckles on there. So that's the first one. So this next one is the May Sock Club. So if you haven't got yours yet, just skip along a minute or so. So this one is based on the film Top Gun and the song Take My Breath Away. And it is sort of based on a tropical sunset, because there's a scene where Tom Cruise is on his motorbike and riding into the sunset, and there's a very romantic scene that's a little bit saucy with a love interest in it. So that's what I was inspired by this yarn. And we've got purples, reds, oranges and yellows in there. So I'm now going to show some of the Mixtape minis as well. This set is from April, and what I try and do is make the colours all go together so that they can be used in a project together, like a pair of socks or a cowl or a shawl or something. But of course, if you didn't want to do that, you could just use them for a blanket if you wanted to. These are on a Selena base actually. So these are based on the songs Just a Mirage, Trouble, I Want That Man, Drop the Pilot and Joyride. So normally I put a card with the information of the songs and a little bit of information about each of the songs as well. The last set from May, so if you haven't got your May minis set, please look away for another minute. So these ones are Hit Me With Your Best Shot, Lovely Day, You Make My Dreams Come True, Friday I'm in Love, and Come and Get Your Love. So that's for May. So I won't show you any more because I could be here all day. But those are some of the yarn clubs so that you know sort of what they look like. With the Mixtape minis, I try and make them a set, like I say. You can go together for a pair of socks or a cowl or a shawl or something, or can be used in a blanket, for instance. And the sock set is obviously supposed to go together for a pair of socks, but you don't have to make socks, you can make anything you like. So I think that's all from the Ask Me Anything thread, but I do have a little bit of information in my shop update. So for the June yarn clubs, they've now closed and I will be shipping next week, so watch out for those through the post box. And the July yarn clubs will be available from June the 18th, so watch out for that. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I shall see you in the next episode. Bye!